So today we are super excited to have Cate Quinn with us, who began her career as a travel and lifestyle journalist before taking the plunge into fiction, where she wrote the best-selling Thief Take series, which has gained her critical acclaim as a historical fiction author. Her first contemporary novel, Black Widows, went to a 7-way auction and was optioned for a film before being snapped up by Orion as their super lead book of 2020. And it's gone on to sell, your first series went on to sell in 9 other territories, including North America.
Yeah, I think so. I'm still adding that up. I actually had a bet with my partner that I would take him to this really fancy hotel if we sold in 10. And I was keeping account of it, and I think it did make it to 10, so shh.
Amazing. I'm sure more by the time that we launch this as well. Well, Cath, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. We'll try and keep it brief. We've got so many questions for you. So the first one is, you've obviously had a very varied and interesting career, and you got a lot of, I think, in addition to your studies, you got a lot of postgraduate funding to do lots of research from the Arts Council, and you've clearly used all of that in your writing to great success. So tell us how it all happened. How did you get into writing? What was that journey like?
Thank you for the introduction, by the way. I have always wanted to be a writer since I can even remember. So I think I'm very, very fortunate, because I know that's kind of a different thing for different people in terms of having a kind of a goal of where you want your life to go. The first piece of work I ever remember doing, like age 5 at school, was a picture of me as a writer at a desk, and I always wrote stories and I always wanted to be a writer. So in a weird way, I almost got sidetracked with the journalism, because I think I was quite underconfident about getting published by a publisher. So I kind of almost figured, like, well, this is a way to if you can get small things done, then I'll get around to doing that big book type of thing. But it was always on the cards.
Incredible. And so obviously we touched on earlier that you had a 7-way auction for your book, which is absolutely incredible. I feel like we should take a minute just to say that is insane. Well done.
Thank you.
We're just so excited for you. And like, in terms of the publishing journey, from you were saying there you maybe didn't have the confidence we didn't have the confidence to just go straight into publishing. Did your journey into publishing, was it exactly how you had envisioned it actually after you'd done all your journalism, or was it totally different to how you thought it would be?
That's a really good question. I think probably like most authors, I envisage it happening a bit faster. And I think the first book that I wrote was probably not as good as I thought it was at the time. And it's only now, looking back, that I think, oh, you know what, if people ask me that book now, I'm kind of a bit like, oh no, don't read some of the later ones. So I learned an awful lot through writing books, and I was really fortunate with some of the editors I had. So that process, I think, was quite different. That I arrived thinking I was this ready-made product, and then learned that I really, really wasn't, through reader feedback as well, which was amazing to have. And that was really a journey, and a really good one, a really humbling one, but a really good one.
Yeah. And what do you have any advice for authors that might be starting out on that same journey, or questioning whether they could even consider going to publishing?
Yeah, I do. I think I always say the same thing, which is think about self-publishing, because I think when you think about self-publishing, the very act of thinking about self-publishing means you have to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's actually going to have to sell the book. So often, like authors, myself included, have this sort of thing that we just want to write, and we're pretty sure someone will pick it up the other end and wave the magic wand, and it will somehow make it onto the shelves. But having that view of, hang on a minute, someone's got to sell this, it definitely changed my mindset in terms of understanding big concepts and that kind of thing. And I would also say pay an awful lot of attention to the concept before you start writing, because it's tempting to run off and start writing your book, but actually you sometimes lose confidence halfway through, and part of that is probably because your concept wasn't as good as it could have been. Whereas if you spend that extra time getting your really good concept, then you're confident that what you're writing, at least you like it. So
I was going to say, so would you say that it's ideas first then and then plotting? Is that the way that you would approach a book?
Yeah, so it's changed a bit, like not an awful lot. Hang on, I'm just trying to think about, so when I first started writing, I did always have a concept, obviously, but I would often write the beginning very, very tightly. And then what I found was, with a plot-driven book, and I do tend to be plot-driven books, you can tie yourself into knots, because then when you get to the end, you realise the things that you maybe envisaged at the end, when you actually write them, you realise there are sort of practical elements. When you actually sort of put yourself in the room, you're like, oh wait, that's not going to work. You know, actually that wouldn't happen. And then your beginning's all tight and you can't go back and get in it, and you end up with this baggy beginning with all this sort of extra material that you've tried to throw in there. So now I come up with the concept, I think about the concept a lot, and then when I'm happy with that, I write a sort of loose beginning and have fun with it, but leave lots of space, and then I try and write the middle end normally, and then I sort of flip back and forward.
So you're sort of saying that you do plot, but you do also leave space around plotting. That's really interesting. So is that how you would structure it? You would never do a tight structure of A, B, C, D in terms of what happens in the book. You sort of do leave that space on purpose in case your characters do something kind of wacky that you hadn't quite anticipated.
Yeah, more or less. So I used to plot a lot more heavily, and normally when I get to the end of a book, I would have like this huge board of post-its and, you know, kind of equivalent of cards that I would sort of shuffle around. I use Scrivener now for that, which is helpful, but actually what I've found is actually there's no substitute for just writing it. So it's fun to come up with the ideas, but until you write them down, you don't actually know how they're going to come. And yeah, like you do get sort of things that the characters do that surprise you without sounding sort of pretentious, but it happens, or just sort of strokes of genius that you're like, oh, that's a really good idea. And I think also leaving things really loose means that you're not so wedded to material, so you can cut it. Whereas often if you've written like the beginning and you've written it to death, and then you realise that it could be edited, you're like, oh, I spent days, you know, on this sort of particular scene, and it's much harder to cut. Whereas if you keep it quite loose and bouncy, you can sort of shed those things without your heart breaking too badly over it.
And where do you find that your ideas come from? Because you've obviously written a lot of books. You don't show any signs of stopping. But are you ever worried that there's not going to be another idea around the corner, or does it come quite naturally to you?
I have a lot of ideas. I mean, I do just really like to write stuff. And actually, you know, if it wasn't for my other commitments to like the human beings in my world, I would honestly just write from the minute I get up, and then probably like go back in the evening and either watch sort of researchy type stuff or write some more. I've normally got a few ideas. I mean, I'm often working across a couple of books. So at the moment I'm working on one book, but I've got an idea for another book, and it sort of keeps things exciting.
How do you manage that? So you've obviously got your amazing sort of historical, so you did the historical research and then you tied that into crime fiction, so it's historical crime fiction, which is just a really amazing marrying of two things, I think. And then you've just said you've got 2 books on the go. How do you sort of manage those in terms of the ideas? How do you keep it streamlined so you don't ping between your 2 different books? Do you ever get confused when you're writing?
Yeah, I was getting a bit of that recently actually, and I thought I'm going to have to shelve this book a little bit. And sorry, I just realised I didn't properly answer your question, did I? In terms of where I get my ideas from, I don't really know. I think it's like most, if you write stuff or you do kind of arty creative stuff, it seems to almost come from somewhere else. It's a strange thing to explain, you know. It almost like it does really pop into your head, and it's something that can't really be forced. And often I kind of find myself like asking for ideas in a sort of slightly hippie creative visualization. If I can't think of something for a book, I'll kind of just say, okay, give me the answer tomorrow, and then I find it works. It just seems to pop in there magically. So that's kind of one possible weird tip.
Well, that links to what, so Charlotte and I are obsessed with Liz Gilbert and her book Magic. Have you read that? Because that she sort of talks about manifesting and inspiration coming. Is that sort of where you got that idea from, or was it somewhere totally different?
Well, you know, that idea's been around. I mean, there's kind of like The Secret and all that sort of stuff, but yeah, I mean, I think it works. I mean, it's obviously how everybody's it's going to be different for different people, isn't it? But I think most people have the power to bring things into their lives, and it just depends. You know, you might personally find that when you go to church, or you might personally find that when you hang out with your friends, and it's very unique and personal, but I think everyone has the power to bring good stuff in. It's just how you best works for you.
And Cath, how do you go about taking all that creativity and inspiration and then turning that into a book, which is obviously requires a lot of organization and a lot of discipline? And we're fascinated with just how you marry those 2 sort of sides of the brain. I mean, what is your writing process? Do you have any tips?
Oh, thank you for. I mean, I think I have a definite bit in the middle, which is horrible, and I think every single book I have a point where I think this is absolutely awful, and everything I've done today has been an absolute fluke, and this I will never finish, and it's going to be a terrible reflection of my powers to date. But I think I get really excited at the beginning. I get hugely excited and write reams of material, and then I have that horrible moment in the beginning, in the sort of middle beginning. And then eventually I sort of plod on through, and by the time I get to the end, then it's suddenly like enlightenment, and then I realise I have to rewrite more or less everything, but at that point it's okay, because, you know, at least I know where I'm going with it, type of thing. So I suppose it's a kind of a plotting technique, kind of informed by actually just writing a huge volume of stuff, and most of my books would have almost the same amount of words again that have been cast aside.
And do you share those sort of manuscripts, early manuscripts, with anybody?
I probably would never share them with an editor, because they think I was really, really heading in the wrong direction, or just, you know, like kind of really not very good, really. And it's quite hard to. I might share them with my sister. I'm really, really fortunate. I've got a twin sister who's a best-selling author, and we swap manuscripts. So I might share it with her and say, what do you think? Because she would be rude enough to just say, like, this is dreadful and that's not going to work, and she would kind of have the faith that I would completely revisit it, whereas an editor might be too nice to kind of really suggest that things are completely dumped.
That sounds like it could be hell or heaven, that having a sister that also
oh,
right.
It's really good. It's like having another version of yourself when you're really tired, like someone who can just kind of read your stuff with fresh eyes. It is annoying. There's nothing more annoying than hearing something that's a massive change that you have to sort of apply, but it's worth having.
Absolutely. And Kath, you obviously know a thing or two about writing a great crime novel. What do you think the ingredients of a great crime book is? Oh.
Ooh, well, thank you for the compliment. I used to think it was plot, and now I have matured into thinking it is character. So the books that I always thought were amazing and had the best plots and were a little bit thin on character, I've subsequently realised had way more character than I ever really gave them credit for. And I think that what we all want to do as human beings is read about an interesting person, like obviously doing interesting stuff, but really we're emotionally engaged with that person and what they're going to do and what's going to happen to them. So yeah, interesting character.
How do you come up with your characters then? So do you know all their backstory? Do you know where they went to university? Do you know like their favourite food? Is that sort of how you plot your characters?
Yeah, I do, and I used to do that whole. I have got pages and pages of like questions that I kind of pop out for every novel that will be literally, you know, what they've got in their pockets at any given time, that sort of thing. I use that a bit less now. I think I do a bit more now, just writing scenes with them in. But yeah, certainly I would know their mum, their dad, their star sign, you know, all that kind of stuff, where they went to school, their life story today. That's a lot of the stuff that gets cut, probably.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And do you have a different approach with the historical fiction as you have done with the crime? Is it a different process, or is it the same kind of structure?
I think it's surprisingly similar, and it's so much fun doing historical characters, because I'm like a bit of a historical geek, and to me it's like this incredible world, and it's like, come with me, come look, it's amazing in here, and all those, the idea that someone could have a life, this historical figure, and you can delve into that and see the minutiae of their daily existence, I find really fascinating and compelling.
And in terms of authors who maybe you've read and who sort of changed you or changed your life in terms of you then wanting to become a writer even more, or just an author you reread over and over again, do you have any that you could sort of shout out now?
I don't have many authors that I reread, apart from, I suppose I would go back almost as research to pick apart how they've done it. But Dan Brown, I'd have to say, I think is like, I know it's not the sort of critic's choice, but I think Dan Brown is amazing. Yeah. And I very often go back to those books to just see how he does that amazing, compelling tension. And Leanne Moriarty also, I have reread her books because I think she is masterly in a very similar yet different way, because it's obviously all character led, but setting up those amazing real life scenarios where you think, oh my God, a real person that I might meet could kill somebody because of what's going on in their life, and it's just so fascinating and believable. So yeah, those two I think, but there are lots. I mean, probably too many.
And would you say that obviously you've done the two genres very well? Do you have a favourite? And what would you write next if you were going to move on?
Oh, that's a good question, isn't it? I mean, I like them both for very different reasons. I love the fact that with historical fiction, you're creating that. I suppose you're creating the world a bit more because you have a bit more license, because no one really knows some of the details, you know, so you can make things up a little bit more. But that said, it slows you down, so it's a lot of fun to write contemporary fiction, because it's like, you know, all that stuff because you've lived it, and suddenly, oof, you know, like 10 pages have gone, and it's been so easy, and you haven't had to stop and kind of just double check that they had wheat back then in that form or something, or that kind of, yeah, there's lots of sort of small details like that you just have to check. Oh, it's a really good question. I mean, I would probably put them on a par. I think at the moment I am doing another contemporary one currently, and I suppose after that I will probably do a historical one, so I'll probably switch back and forth, yeah, depending on what happens.
Sorry, so if you want to introduce your new book and then tell us a bit about it, that would be great.
Oh, thank you. Well, that book was the most fun I've ever had writing a book. It was so much fun to write. So it's about 3 women who are married to the same guy, which in itself I just find like infinitely fascinating. Like, how does that even work? How do you remain married to the same guy? How is your relationship with the other women? All those kind of things. What sort of woman would choose to marry a guy who is maybe already married, or choose to accept another wife? And in that relationship, the husband is murdered. One of the wives committed the crime, and the book is about which wife did it.
It sounds amazing.
The blurb is so exciting for it. You can tell you've done such a great job because you just want to get your hands on it. It's really exciting. And so when can we expect to read it?
Well, so it will be February next year. It was going to come out in July, and now it's been moved because of the lockdown bookshop thing. So it'll be coming out in February in England and America, and I think it comes out in Holland in September. I think there was a very slight overlap.
Someone didn't get the memo.
In February, unless you're Dutch.
And where can everybody find you in the meantime if they wanted to read your other books and just find out more about you as an author?
Oh, well, I guess so. C.S. Quinn as a historical author on Amazon probably is the best place, but I am on Twitter and I am on Facebook as well.
And what's your Twitter handle, if you can remember it?
Twitter is Cath Writes Stuff.